Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today at this event. My name is Shauna James. I am the Community and Events Manager here at PreSales Collective, and we are so thrilled to have Stacy Henry and Julie Donaldson join us for our Fireside chat today. This is the WISE Kickoff event. WISE is our Women in Solutions Excellence group here at PreSales Collective. We are so thrilled for this event. So just a few housekeeping items. We first just want to thank you so much for making PSC possible. We are a growing group of about 17,000 people in our community, and we are really grateful to have you here. So how can you get the most out of today's webinar? Well, you can certainly ask questions using the Q&A function. You can find that on the black bar at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the event. I will be getting to answer those. Also, please be active in the chat. We will read it. We will respond. Thank you so much. Great. So I'm just going to launch a quick poll so we can get to know who is in the room. And the question is, which option best describes your current role? So if you wouldn't mind just letting us know, we like to know who's in the room for our events to make sure that we are capturing to the best of our ability, our community. For those of you just joining us, welcome. We're getting ahead with some housekeeping items before the main event. If you want to go ahead and drop in where you're calling in from, we'd love to know where you are in the world. Fantastic. So I am going to go ahead and end this, and here we go. All right. Now is the main event. I'm still getting used to using this Zoom thing. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. All right. So the main event, I'm going to stop talking. We have two fabulous folks with us today. Stacy Henry, who is the founder at CenterBranch and wrote the book Get Rooted, which we have all maybe read or maybe we haven't read, but we're going to learn about. And Julie Donaldson, our Director of Solutions Engineering at Oracle, and is also our WISE chairwoman here at PSC, are going to be in conversation about the book. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Julie, pass it over to you, and let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Shauna. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our kickoff. I'm here in nice and warm Washington, D.C. area. And it's warm today, but it snowed a couple days ago. So we'll see what it's like later on this week. But welcome to our kickoff for 2022. We are so excited to be here. And, we had it's our new year, new focus, right? We have a new things that we want to work on. As we all know, we've had a very tough and contentious last couple of years with everything that hit, and with COVID and the pandemic and all of our lives changing and going upside down. But this time, when you think about it, last year when we did our kickoff, everybody thought it was going to be gung-ho and we were going to be back to normal. Right? Everything was going on full steam ahead and we'd be back to normal, but it really didn't happen. It kind of just stayed status quo. Some things changed. Some people started traveling a little bit again and things like that, but it still really didn't change back to the way it was. So what we did as the WISE Council is we wanted to come up with a theme for us to work on throughout the year to really understand what it's like to just reset and refocus and move, and it's okay to move ahead. So that's what our theme is today. And our theme for the year is reset and refocus. And to start this off, we're very excited to have Stacy Henry, the founder of CenterBranch and the author of the book, Get Rooted, right here with us today. Good morning, Stacy. I hope you're doing well this morning or afternoon. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much. First and foremost, let me just say I am honored to be here. It truly is a privilege to be joining you all and to be having this chat. When folks say, tell me a little bit about yourself, I never really know where to start. And so I'm actually going to start with who I am, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I do. And when we think about who I am, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a cat mom, I'm a pastor, I'm a Harley rider, I'm a gal, not well, by the way, and I'm also a gal who's just trying to figure out this thing called life, like probably many of us on the line. The what I do is actually less important than the who I am, but what I do, I'm a leadership and an executive coach. I'm an author, I'm a business consultant, and like I just said, I'm a gal trying to figure out this thing called life. I've had a lot of different experiences and privileges in my life, from startup companies all the way through leading full functions in Fortune 50 organizations. And I've learned a lot along the way. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Stacy. Harley writer. That's good. That's interesting.
I should also mention, I am not a fisherman, despite what we see in the background here. My boyfriend is, and I'm actually in his office on a different computer setup altogether. So full transparency, the fish are not mine.
That's okay. Well, thank you. It's great for you to be here. We're all excited for it. And let's talk a little bit about your book and how it can really help us to get reset and refocus. So again, our theme was reset and refocus. So Getting Rooted is the perfect book to kick us off, right? To really start our resetting process. So in order to reset, you must really understand and think about today, how you got here, where you want to go. And this really starts with understanding our roots, going back to the book, right? So at the very beginning of the book, I was hooked right away on your first statement that the only constant in this world is change. And you learned that lesson very young, and you talked about that in the introduction. And that just change is an inevitable part of our life, and we have to accept it, and we have to learn how to move forward with that. This is a perfect statement for the group and our theme to kick off the year. Why don't you explain a little bit to the group about how we could start our resetting process?
Absolutely. When we think about change, it absolutely is inevitable. And the first thing I'd say is, when we're faced with a change that's going to require any kind of reset, which usually is 99.9% of the changes that we have, the first thing we do is make a decision. And that decision point is, will you, as a listener, hold on to the past or hold on to the current situation, or will you embrace that change? And so before we actually dive into the roots and figuring that part out, that's where we start. We start with making this choice of hold on to the past or current, or embrace it. And there's no right or wrong answer here. As a matter of fact, most people, they choose what they know. They actually choose the current situation consciously, subconsciously, because embracing change is like kind of giving a hug to a prickly bush, right? It's hard work. It requires more work. It requires more effort, where, kind of holding on to the past or holding on to the current situation, it's what we know. Once that decision is made, when we think about, okay, I'm going to reset, I'm going to refocus, from there we can actually start to understand our roots. And I know our entire conversation today is going to be around that. I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. When I say roots, I'm really talking about our values, right? And so what we're rooted in are values. And it's a very simple way to start asking yourself, if I'm picking change or if I'm not picking change, what's actually driving that decision? That's going to be the first indicator of what we're rooted in and where we have to potentially reset.
That's great. And that leads me right into my next question I have for you. It's like, I loved how you focused and you outlined everything related to a tree, and starting with the roots of a tree. And within that, you had something called a CenterBranch, which is also the name of your company. Can you just enlighten us on how this is related to everyone that wants to go through a resetting and refocus process?
Absolutely. When I think about a tree and I think about a person, I see a lot of similarities. And trust me when I tell you that people have said, Stace, what are you, like, that's crazy. What are you thinking? Just go with me on this one. Every single tree, it has a root system. Doesn't matter if it's a pine tree, a palm tree, a poplar tree. I didn't pick all peas on purpose, but it doesn't matter what kind of tree it is. They all have roots. And what that tree is rooted in actually determines how it grows, how it thrives, or not. And people are exactly the same. We're all rooted in something, which is, as I mentioned before, it's our value system. And that actually determines how we grow or we thrive or not. The interesting thing about the root system, both of people as well as trees, we don't always get to see the roots. What we're rooted in actually shows up in our center branch, and that's kind of where the center branch comes from. So every single tree has a trunk that's called a center branch, and that's how that tree shows up in the world. Some center branches are tall, some are thin, some are stocky. People are the same, not necessarily tall, thin, or stocky, but our center branch is really how we're showing up, or said a little bit differently, it's how people experience us. So what we're rooted in shows up in our center branch, and that's how people kind of experience us. So when we think about your theme, kind of resetting and refocusing, I'd ask the question, are we growing? Are we thriving? Are we just surviving? That's going to help us really determine what we're rooted in. Is it like stress? Is it fatigue? All of that. That's really where I think kind of that the root system and the center branch come into play.
That's great how the center branch really plays that role. And as I'm sitting in my home office looking at my trees outside, I just think about how they're all different, and it's just the same as us, right? We're all different and have to figure out what our roots are. And just like the tree does in the center branch is the trunk of it.
Well, exactly. And so, just to add on to that point, Julie, one of the things that we don't often think about though is what is it that is really showing up, right? How are people experiencing us? And then if we bring that back to our root system, that's the key connector and kind of that reset, refocus area.
Yeah, very good. Love it. So as you know, 2020 and 21, again, was a huge wake-up call. Now we're on to 3 years into the pandemic. And again, as I talked about in the beginning, we felt the beginning of last year, we were gung-ho, everybody was moving ahead and didn't really think about the past. We were just ready to move forward.
Yeah.
So, at the beginning, we thought it was going to be normal. And I think you did too, didn't you? And,
I absolutely did. I was like, oh, this is going to be over in a couple of months. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah. So again, your book may work timelier for us in helping us putting some of those time into ourselves and being able to reflect. So what effects that you seen not only in yourself but out as you talk to other people about your book or about within your company? What effects have you seen as a result of the pandemic and COVID and how it's relation to people?
I pause. I'm literally like, oh, so many effects that I've seen. I've seen both the positive and then the other side of that, the not so positive. As I sit back and I reflect on COVID, one of the first things that I think about and what I saw with my clients, and I'm talking about, individual coaching clients and even large organizations, is that there was this sense of almost like a grip, like this, I'm going to grip and hold on to everything that I can possibly control. And the more that things went out of control, the more that control kind of took root. And I'm like tensed up right now because it's really kind of what I saw initially is what I did initially. I thought in the very beginning, no, this is going to be over in a month. A month later, I'm like, okay, not so much. So how can I control this? And I found myself having to go back and say, whoa, this is okay. I'm actually starting to control things, which isn't necessarily what I wanted to be rooted in. It's really, really easy to go there because control, when we do that, when we take that control, and what I saw with my clients, it gives this false sense of security. It's like, well, if I'm going to grip onto something, I'm going to create a sense of security, but it actually does the opposite. And when we can't really control the situation, our insecurities kind of rise up. As I'm going to were you going to say something? I apologize. So.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. I was
No,
going to agree with you.
I was just going to say, as time went on, that lessened a little bit. And I saw people kind of moving into this state of almost like languishing. And it's like an in-between. I'm swerving back and forth because it's this in-between state of thriving or just hanging on. It was kind of like this, meh. I'm just in this thing.
Right.
So I did see a lot of effects from that perspective. And it was almost like this not quite good status quo that people were moving into and companies were moving into as well.
Right. And I think a lot of people lost their sense of control. And as we talk further, when we get a little bit later into the book, it's with all that happening, you lost a lot of the control that you thought you had. So in all this, how is it strengthened or weakened our roots from this?
I think it's both, right? And so, we've seen both this experience where people truly did kind of, as I mentioned in the beginning, embrace that change and dive into positive change. Some folks, they took this and they said, okay, I'm going to learn to cook. I'm a personal benefactor of that because somebody in my life decided, hey, I think I'm going to learn how to cook, which rock on for me. I get, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which is awesome. But I've also seen like these really big swings, and for so many people, for the people who chose to pause, reflect, and reset, they were strengthening their value system or their roots. And really those folks, a lot of folks, myself included, spent time pruning back the roots that didn't work. I spent an entire year last year on a farm in Pennsylvania, which is, by the way, where I live. I happen to be in South Florida now. But I took that time to pause and say, what is it that I truly want to be rooted in? What is it that I want driving my decisions, driving how I show up? I reflected on that. And then I refocused where I was putting my efforts. Now, I took a year to do that while I was working. I've seen other people do it in the course of 2 hours. So big swings in strengthening. I've also seen big swings in folks that have weakened their, if they weren't already rooted in the right things and they stayed in that kind of meh or that grip of I have control or I don't have control, that was especially troublesome for those folks and those organizations. I've seen organizations really suffer that way.
Yeah, and I think I agree. I think I saw a lot of people that were on both sides of that. And it leads me, to one of the next things I wanted to talk about is, and it actually a great quote from Vicki Cox, who's part of our WISE council. When we were talking earlier a couple weeks ago, she had the best quote. And I know you're friends with her and Kelly. Thank you, them both, for introducing you to us. But she had the great quote of, while you're stuck in the mud, start growing some roots. It was perfect, right, for people to think about, especially people that did not go through that process or weren't trained on really or understanding how they could do that. So what are your thoughts how we can grow and move forward knowing we still have the unknown, like some examples?
Yeah, it's interesting because when Vicki said that quote, it struck me when she said it, and I was like, oh,
I know.
And I literally had this vision of people kind of just trying to drudge through the mud. They're able to still walk through it, but it's this heavy, almost like burdensome, messy situation. And then the next thing that popped into my mind after thinking about me walking through the mud was about the mangrove tree, and how remarkably tough that particular tree is. And it came to my mind because it lives in muddy soil. and it grows on sand, it grows on coral, really where it's unstable, very similar to kind of what we're experiencing right now with COVID. Interestingly, when I think about your question, how can we move through the mud? We don't know what's next, right? We thought we did in 2020, and then we thought we did in 2021. And now we're February 17th of 2022. We don't know. It's all still really, really uncertain. And so when we think about how do you grow while you're still in the mud, it's saying, where am I today? Right. And so if we think about a couple of examples, I would ask the team that's listening, where are you today? Are you in the mud? Are you in the mud puddle? What is it that you can glean and grow from in this current experience without having to wait for something to change? And I think that's a big key, because so often, and again, I found myself here, I'm going to wait until XYZ, or I'm going to just hang on a little bit longer until this situation changes, whether it's COVID or any other situation. That may never change. So asking yourself, what can I do today in my current situation, I think is far more important as we're growing through the mud than what do I do when it's better, if that makes any sense at all.
That makes 100% a lot of sense to me. Mm-hmm. And, when you think about that, and I just relate it back to the tree, I mean, a tree goes perfectly well in mud and wet dirt, and the same with any type of tree. So there's no reason that, you're still starting out in the mud, your roots are stuck in the mud, but you can grow and you can blossom from it.
Oh, 100%. I often think like the muddier our situation is, the more we grow and the more we blossom. We just don't realize it at the exact moment. Right. And we're not going to see it until either it clears, or in the case of the mangrove, until it blooms, right? Mm-hmm. And so the after effect of really walking through and growing through that's going to be long term. And that's where we'll be able to kind of look back and say, okay, if that was hard, that was really hard and muddy and ugly, and here's how I paused, took a look at where I'm at, reset and refocused, and the benefits of that come later on.
Yeah, it's almost like the sun comes out, right? Yeah. and it brightens everything up and you can move on. So with that, let's take a break and see if we have any questions from Kelly in our chat.
Sure.
Hi, Kelly.
Hey, everyone. Stacey, first of all, I'm hanging on every word you're saying. It's like you're talking right to me. And I have two questions here that are actually really similar. I think you'll get to this in your talk track today, but they're so spot on. I have to bring it up here. So first of all, I'd love to hear you just speak for another minute on what languishing really means. Personally, I just had someone kind of share some articles and tell me a little bit more about this languishing word recently. And it was like, yes, I get it. So I'd love to have you just speak on that for a minute. But the two questions were, one, when you talked about being rooted in values, you said you can, choose to change or not. This question said, I want to change, but it seems too daunting. What are some easy ways to start? And then the second question, which I think is similar in nature, is, how do I deal with this languishing? And, I think in these pre-sales collective wise sessions, we try to really give actionable, even if it's small little items, how can we get started? And then one more thing, by the way, I just posted in the chat for folks, like, would love to hear from you too, to Stacey's point, if you're growing your roots, even if it's something small, let's share with the rest of the community, comment in here and share. So that's where we are. I'll turn it back over to you, Stacey.
Okay. So I'll start with the languishing. And it is such a great question. And I'm going to talk high level about it, because I I'm still getting so much more information. I will say there's a lot of articles being written, one from HBR that was just phenomenal. Kelly, I'll send it to you, and Julie and the team, you can disperse that. But when I think about this state of languishing, it's not depression, right? And so when we're depressed, we're kind of like, it shows up and it manifests in different ways for different people, but it's a state where you can say, okay, I'm actually depressed. I'm either fatigued, tired, whatever. It's also not thriving. And when I think about thriving, like, you are on your game, you are in the headspace, in all the right spaces, just kind of firing on all cylinders. Languishing is the best way that I describe it is, it's like the state of moving through all of the actions that we have to do without fully being present. We know we're having, presentations. We know we're having conversations. We know we're doing, family, home, work, life, all of that. But it's just kind of this movement through versus the other two bookends of depression or of like thriving. And you don't often realize you're in that state. Right. And so it just becomes almost routine. It becomes this space of, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm going to make my coffee, I'm going to go to my computer, I'm going to do all of these things. And until you kind of label that, I don't think that we're able to move from it. And it's not a negative thing. It's not something where we're saying you shouldn't be there. It's an acknowledgement of, I am here. So what do I do about it? The first thing is identifying it and saying, where am I today in that? Kelly, I'm thinking about the next question, and I'm not going to lie, I've already forgotten it. So my attention span is minimal.
No. I'll get it. Simply, what are some of those small things that I want to change? So what are some small things that I can do, because it seems very daunting right now?
It is. It really is. And I'm going to acknowledge whoever said that, or the collective of the folks who have said it's daunting. Yes, and yes. This is hard work. I'm also going to say, I'm going to have you hang on, because at the end, what we're going to do is actually go through one of the ways that has worked for me, for some of my clients, on just starting. So I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek and of the trailer. But when you think about, where do I start? Think about what's driving my decisions. So that's where we're going to say, okay, what's driving my decisions? Is it love? Is it complacency? Is it competition? Is it, my confidence level? That will help you to start identifying your root systems and your values. So what is driving my decisions? This is going to take some internal thought, and it's probably not something that you're going to get an immediate answer on unless it's really obvious. I'll give you an example. Prior to me stepping out of a corporate role and into starting my own business, I was in this space of trying to control everything. Bank account, financials, insurance. How am I going to do this? What are all the things? Where are my contacts? And I paused to reflect on what's driving my decisions, because it felt very chaotic and daunting. It was lack of confidence and lack of faith. I didn't have the faith and the confidence. So that's what I realized, I was rooted in the wrong things. So it could be as quick and as simple as that.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Languishing really hit me hard. I was having a conversation with my sister. It was probably 6 months ago. And I was like, yeah, I get up every morning. Because I traveled a lot before pandemic. I get up every morning, I brush my teeth, I get dressed, I drink my coffee, and I go to work. So it's perfect example of maybe making a few changes to get thinking about different things. So I love it. So one of the things you talk about in your book is having shallow roots. So
Yeah.
What does that mean whenever you're facing challenging times?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because identifying your roots is kind of the first step in saying, okay, here's where I'm at. And then from there, you strengthen those roots. And that's really what helps you become deeply rooted. And when we're really deeply rooted in our value system, we are able to withstand the situations that come at us. And so I think that the first part is identifying what, right? What are my roots? Are they shallow or are they deep? And shallow roots is really meaning I want to be, I'll give you an example. I want to be rooted in love. I say that I'm rooted in love, but my decisions are based on something other than love. When push comes to shove, we're going to topple over there. And I can't help myself but give another tree analogy. I try to not do it, and I fail miserably every time. We think about, a palm tree. I'm in Florida right now, and folks make the assumption that the roots are shallow. They make the assumption that the roots in a palm tree are shallow because they can actually see them, right? They see them coming up out of the ground. The reality is that the palm tree roots go far deeper than an oak tree's roots go wide. And when you think about a mighty oak, that's big. And when you think about both of those in a storm, any kind of storm, often what we're going to see is an uprooting. And it's 9 times out of 10, it's the oak tree, because their roots are shallow. They're wide, but they're shallow. And I think about the same thing about us, right? And so when life comes at us, challenging situations, whether it's a potentially challenging new prospect or a customer or a family event, doesn't matter, COVID, doesn't matter. What we're rooted in when we're deeply rooted is how sturdy we stand versus how much are we swaying and how much are we moving around and potentially personally becoming uprooted when our roots aren't strong. So that's kind of how I think about that.
Perfect example. And I love that you combine it with the tree. It just, when I look out and it's windy and some trees are moving more than others, right? So you joke also in the book, you joke about not being a botanist. However, you shared an interesting fact on page, something that I've never heard before. And it was on page 94 of the book. And actually just last week or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, whatever, I was watching Jeopardy and I was able to answer a question based on this chapter that you talked about in this book. Can you just talk about the idea of shared roots and the support that you have with that?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, high five that you were able to answer the Jeopardy question. I love the fact that I was able to contribute to that. So I'm gonna take that nugget and it's gonna take me to the rest of the day. So thank you for that. When we think about shared root system, I learned about Pando. And Pando it's a grove of millions of aspen trees. It's actually in South Utah. And all of these millions of trees, these aspen trees, they actually share the same root system. So every single individual tree relies on the root system of its neighboring tree. And when we think about our organizations, our community, our social interactions, our family, we're pretty similar, right? So we're not simply individuals. We're not just like the aspen trees. You listening, you actually share the root system of where you work, where you live, where you are in your community. So in Pando, right, if part of the root system isn't good, those trees suffer. And collectively, what we've seen is groups of them dying. But we've also then seen as those root systems are deteriorating, the root system of the surrounding trees actually come in and help and lift. And they come back to life. And that's exactly when I think about shared root systems, how I think about us as people. So are we surrounding ourselves with a shared root system that's enabling us or contributing to potential challenge or unhealthy roots, if you will? The question that I would ask this group based on theme is, is your collective root system of your organization, your whatever, you can fill in the blank there, is it helping or is it hindering as you reset and you refocus?
That's a great analogy to be able to put back to us. So another favorite part of the book was when you talked about the different aspects of your life, and how it relates to starting to get rooted. And one of the things was that I really enjoyed reading about was progress versus perfection, and how really the two do mean different things, and they can get blurry. Yeah. Not only that, they can also work in conjunction with one of the other ones you had, which was trust versus control, which is another one that are two very different things, but they relate to each other with progress versus perfection. So why don't you elaborate a little bit on trust versus control and progress versus perfection, and how they relate together and how you can use that to grow and start to get rooted.
Just for context, when I wrote the book, I wrote the book with root systems, air quote, values in a dichotomy. And it's based on personally what I've seen myself do, but also, based on what I've seen most organizations do. And when I think about progress and perfection, it's a versus, right? And so are you rooted in progress? Or are you rooted in perfection? Full disclosure, full transparency, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I practice progress over perfection on an hourly basis. As a matter of fact, getting onto this particular webinar, I had to practice progress because I couldn't get on my regular computer because of a challenge that I had. So, I think when we think about the difference, we often think that perfectionism is really a catalyst to progress. If I get it right, if I get it perfect, that'll propel me forward, which is progress. Well, in fact, perfection is the opposition of progress. And so the more mini steps of progress we can make, the more we're moving forward. Perfection, at its core definition, it's subjective. What you think is perfect, Julie, might be very different than what I think versus what Kelly thinks versus what our viewers think. And so when we shift our mindset from that impossible goal of perfection, because if it is subjective, it's impossible, we shift it from this has to be perfect to this is the progress I've made. We give ourselves a break, and we actually can then celebrate our wins. And as a perfectionist, we often miss celebrating our wins. And I say that, you had mentioned it's tightly knit with control versus trust. And often, we're seeking perfection because we're measuring ourselves by, identifying as I have to be this way, or my confidence level isn't this, or the presentation was this, or my client conversation was that. I could kind of keep going on. When we identify and measure our identity by what we're rooted in progress over perfection, we're loosening the control that we take from other avenues, people, situations, whatever it is. We get to celebrate that much more. And I want to just pause and say one other thing. When we think about the control aspect of perfectionism, it's often driven directly from a lack of confidence. Now, we're not saying that. We're not saying we're not confident, but it's inside. I also work on that every 10 minutes, right? And so the less confident we are, it often means the less progress I'm going to celebrate, the more perfection I'm going to seek, the more control I'm going to try and take. And so then it becomes this cycle that's really hard to get out of. I would ask myself, I do hourly, what little piece of control can I give up that might help me make a progress movement versus seeking perfection?
And it's really great. And I think Kelly brought this up a couple of weeks ago when we were talking. This is, you're speaking to the Women in Solution Excellence group. We also have our allies, but for women in general, and especially in this technical field that we're in, we always think we have to be perfect, right? I think that's just our motto in the field that we're in. And so this just gives us so much more information that it's really all about progress, right? And perfection, like you said, is, what does it really mean, right? And it's perfect example.
It does. Like when you ask the question, what does this really mean? It also makes me think of the question, why isn't good good, right? So the definition of good is just that, but somewhere along the way, we have this convoluted, definition that good is just, it's okay. No, good is actually good.
Good.
And we can take confidence in that, knowing that we're getting better, we're growing each step of the way.
Absolutely. I love it. So in your conclusion of the book, you state that change is inevitable, but growth is our choice, which leads us to, what we're finishing our conversation on. And we have to learn to really take those steps to grow. And this is so true, especially over, everything that's happened, not just, with COVID, just everything in general with lives changing and things. So with that, and we're getting back to the question that they asked, what are the top 3 things you would recommend for people to start focus on their routine process to start the resetting and refocus process that we have for our theme?
Yeah, so it's such a good question. You probably saw me like grabbing some things in the background. I'm going to go old school with you here. And I just have a blank piece of paper, right? And so the very first thing that I would really recommend to every single person, doesn't matter if you're a solutions engineer or you're an ally, this is a great tip for everyone. Grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, and literally draw a tree. Now, I'm doing this as we speak. Please, no judgments on my artwork, right? So there's my, I'll put a little hole in the middle, right? So beneath kind of the surface level, I'm actually going to draw a root system. And so I'm going to draw the roots of the tree. And then what I would encourage everyone to do is label those roots. Now, we're not going to ask you to share. This isn't a graded exercise, but it's what are the roots in my tree, in my center branch, that is driving my decisions? Am I rooted in love? Am I rooted in control? Am I rooted in complacency? Am I rooted in progress, perfection? I'm just naming some that are in my book, but you can be rooted in anything. It could be faith. It could be, joy. It could literally be anything. And so if we draw our tree and we make our roots, and I'm going to say I'm rooted in joy. I am rooted in love. If I'm being transparent, I'm rooted in right now with a certain situation, low confidence. And I'm going to write those. Right? And so I'm going to label them. You might have 5, you might have 10 roots. The next thing that I'm going to ask you to do is literally cross off the ones that are not serving you. And so you're actually, I call it pruning. You're going to prune those roots back and redraw what you want to be rooted in. So I want to be rooted in trust. I'm not right now because I have low confidence in a situation. From there, what you can do is just pause, reset, and refocus on one single change that you can make to remove or prune that root that is not serving you and strengthen one that is. I can't give you that answer. That is all very, very personal. So that's kind of, that's two actions that I could give you. And I'm going to pause and ask you, Julie, does that sound like something that you would do, or do you think that our group would do?
Absolutely. In fact, I did it after I read your book, but now I'm going to even change a few things because, and that you're constantly going to work on it, which is another perfect example of constantly pruning your tree, making it better. And
it absolutely is. I see, Kelly, you've come back on, and the last thing that I'll say here is this is ever changing, folks. So as you draw, as you prune back, as you decide what you're resetting and refocusing on, it's going to change in 6 months, a year, etc.
Yeah. And I think you were going to, ask yourself, go back to one of your things in the book is who's going to be your pando?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Who's your accountability partner and who's going to be in your pando? And it could be an ally. It could be an accountability partner, family member. It doesn't matter. Find that person. Find that person to be your accountability partner.
I love it, and just to wrap it up, don't everybody leave because we have a couple things to talk about after our chat is over. But on behalf of the PreSales Collective Group and the WISE Group, we really, really appreciate you speaking with us today. Everybody, the book is available on Amazon.com is where I got mine. I'm sure it's available other places, but very easy on Amazon. But we really appreciate the time you took with us today to talk about getting rooted and how it can really help get our theme going for resetting and refocusing and helping us kick that off. So everybody, don't hang up yet, but don't forget, get rooted to get refocused and resetting. So with that, I'm going to turn, Kelly, did you have a question before I turn it over to Shauna?
I don't necessarily have any questions, but there we posted in the chat to the earlier question about how are you growing your roots, and we got some really wonderful insights from folks. So take a second to flip through the chat, but a few highlights were starting with Kim said starting with my morning routine, devotional meditation and exercise, and she said here, which I totally get. I've gotten to the place that even when I don't want to do it, I do it anyway and feel so much better after the fact. Sometimes it's so hard to push ourselves to that. Lucy had commented in here, celebrating the small wins. Did I take a walk? Did I talk to a friend? Did I find the word all those different types of things. Those are great actionable items. And then another one that I thought was great, I'll just quickly mention is waking up, taking the time to wake up a little bit earlier to have some personal time before the rest of the world wakes up. And she said it's been helping me to navigate with, this crazy season of our lives. So there's several more in there. I love everyone sharing that. Just wanted to pop in and highlight a couple of those. And then Shauna, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Julie, Stacy, Kelly. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you all for your attention here. How did we do today? We would love to hear some feedback from you all. I'm going to drop a poll for you all. If you just want to let us know how we did today, what was your experience of this panel? Thank you so much. And then as you're filling this out, I want to let you know about an exciting giveaway that we're doing. We have some copies of Stacy's book that we are going to be giving away, and we're going to be doing it with a competition. So what do you have to do? you are going to post on your personal LinkedIn or on our Slack Wise channel, and I'll tell you how to do that in a second, about how you are hashtag getting rooted this year. We want to hear from you. Share it far, share it wide. Make sure you tag the PreSales Collective on your LinkedIn post. We'll see it when you join the Slack. You can join our Slack by going to presalescollective.com/Slack. And the WISE group is hashtag WISE Women in Solutions Excellence. So you'll have a week to post, you'll have a week to get some noise around it. And then in a week, we will be choosing 35 random people to win, and you will get your very own copy of Getting Rooted. So with that, just a little more information on our Slack. As I mentioned, we have an amazing Slack channel with over 8,000 pre-sales professionals in it. WISE is just one of the amazing groups that's a part of the Slack channel. Please join. Please feel free to add us in there if you have any questions. Again, my name is Shauna. You can always find me in the Slack. I'm around a lot, but we'd love to see you there. And with that, it's 2:54. We're going to let you go a little bit early. And thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being here. And we hope to see you around the community soon.
Bye, everybody.